On the edge of a dying world where the sky burned red and the ground cracked like old bone, a woman walked alone. Her name was Lyra. She was tall and slender, with silver hair that fell past her shoulders and eyes the color of storm clouds. Once she had been a scholar of the stars, studying the music of the spheres in the great libraries of Eloria. Now those libraries were ash and the stars offered no answers, only silence. Beside her, limping slightly on one hind leg, came Kale. He was small for a dragon, no bigger than a large dog, but his presence filled the air like thunder held in check. His scales, once bright as moonlight, were now dull and scarred. One wing hung lower than the other, torn during the last evacuation. Still he stayed close to Lyra, his breath warm against her leg, his golden eyes scanning the ruins for danger. Eloria had fallen not with a great explosion, but with a slow, choking gasp. The Vorthax Collective, a machine empire that saw all organic life as inefficient, had come not to conquer but to erase. They stripped the planet of its energy cores, poisoned the rivers, and silenced the great harmonic towers that once sang the world to sleep each night. Most of Lyra's people had fled. Some fought. Few survived. Lyra had stayed behind to bury her mentor, then her brother, then the last of the temple keepers. By the time she was ready to leave, the evacuation ships were gone. So she walked. She scavenged. She remembered. Today she searched the ruins of the Starwell Spire, a place where priests once drew power from the twin moons. The spire was now a skeleton of twisted metal and shattered crystal. But beneath its shadow, in the cool dark of a collapsed alcove, grew patches of blue lichen. Edible. Barely. Enough to keep her and Kale alive another day. She knelt, careful not to disturb the fragile growth, and used a chipped ceramic knife to scrape the lichen into a cloth pouch. Kale sat nearby, ears twitching. He sniffed the wind. Something was wrong. Lyra froze. She heard it too, not the hum of Vorthax drones, which always came in steady mechanical pulses, but a rough, uneven sound. Like metal groaning, like something alive struggling. She motioned for Kale to stay low and crept toward the sound, her bare feet silent on the cracked stone. Around the bend of a fallen arch, half buried in dust and debris, lay a small escape pod. Its hull was blackened, one side crushed inward, but the hatch had popped open. Smoke curled from a vent, thin and gray. Inside, 3 figures stirred. Lyra hesitated. Strangers meant risk. Strangers could be spies. Or worse, Vorthax mimics wearing stolen faces. But Kale nudged her hand with his snout, his eyes soft. He sensed no malice. She stepped forward. The first to notice her was a young woman with short brown hair and a bloodied bandage around her forearm. She flinched, then tried to sit up, wincing. Her eyes were wide, not with fear but exhaustion. Behind her, an older woman with salt and pepper hair and grease-streaked coveralls was checking the pulse of a third. A quiet-looking girl with dark braids and dirt-smudged cheeks. None of them spoke Lyra's language. But their eyes said everything, lost, thirsty, afraid. Lyra studied them. Humans. She had seen them before, in old star charts and diplomatic records. Fragile, short-lived, loud, but also curious and kind if the stories were true. She reached into her satchel and pulled out her water flask. It was carved from riverstone, sealed with waxed cork. She had less than a quarter left. Enough for one more day, maybe 2. Without a word, she uncorked it and held it out to the injured woman. The human stared at the flask, then at Lyra's face. Slowly she took it. Her hands shook as she drank. Just a sip. Then she passed it to the older woman, who gave it to the girl. Each took only a mouthful, though their lips were cracked and their throats dry. When the flask came back, it was nearly empty. Lyra nodded. That was enough. She opened her pouch and offered half the lichen. The humans ate it without complaint, though it tasted bitter and chalky. The girl smiled faintly, bowing her head in thanks. Night fell quickly on Eloria. The twin moons rose, one pale gold, the other deep violet, and their light painted the ruins in ghostly hues. Lyra built a small fire using dry root fibers and a sparkstone. The humans huddled close, shivering despite the warm air. Their pod had failed to regulate temperature, and they'd been exposed for hours. Kyle, after a long look at the strangers, padded over and curled his body around them like a living blanket. His scales radiated gentle heat. The girl reached out and touched his side. He rumbled softly, a sound like distant thunder. The older woman, Tasha, as Lyra would later learn, whispered something to the others. They nodded. Then Tasha pointed to herself, then to the others. Tasha, she said. Then she pointed to the injured one. Chloe, and the quiet girl. Maya, Lyra understood. She touched her chest. Lyra. Then she placed a hand on Kale's head. Kale, names exchanged. A beginning. As the fire dimmed, Chloe pulled a small med kit from the wreckage of the pod. She cleaned Lyra's scraped knee, something Lyra hadn't even noticed, and wrapped it in a clean strip of cloth. Maya, the botanist, examined the lichen and showed Lyra how to mix it with crushed mineral salts to make it more nutritious. Tasha, meanwhile, tinkered with a broken scanner, muttering about power cells and signal boosters. They worked together without needing words. Hands helped hands. Eyes met eyes. Trust grew in the quiet. Later, as the moons reached their highest point, Lyra sat apart for a moment, watching the humans sleep. Kale lay beside her, his breathing slow and even. She thought of her people, of all she had lost, and yet here, in the ruins of everything, something new had begun. She did not know why she had helped them. Perhaps it was because they reminded her of the old Aelorian saying, "No kindness is too small when the world is ending." Or perhaps it was simply because they were alive. And so was she. The next morning, the humans were stronger. Chloe's fever had broken. Maya had found a patch of edible moss near a dry well. Tasha had jury-rigged a solar charger from the pod's wreckage. They moved with purpose now, not panic. Lyra showed them how to filter the toxic rainwater using layered cloth and charcoal. She taught them which plants to avoid, and which stones held hidden moisture. In return, Tasha fixed the clasp on Lyra's satchel, and Chloe gave her a small vial of antiseptic gel. They were learning each other's rhythms, their silences, their strengths. On the third day, while scanning the horizon with a salvaged lens, Maya stiffened. She pointed east. A glint of metal moved between the dunes. Not natural. Not friendly Vorthax scouts. Lyra's blood ran cold. She motioned for silence and pulled the humans behind a stone outcrop. Kale flattened himself against the ground, his scales shifting to match the gray rock. The drones hovered low, 3 of them, sleek and black, shaped like inverted teardrops. Their sensors swept the area, searching for life signs: heat, movement, sound. The humans held their breath. Chloe's hand found Maya's. Tasha gripped a piece of pipe like a weapon, but Lyra did not panic. She remembered the old songs, the ones that mimicked the calls of Aeloria's sky predators. She hummed softly, a low, resonant tone that vibrated in her chest. Kale joined her, adding a deep, rumbling growl that echoed off the canyon walls. To the Vorthax, it sounded like a hunting pair of razor wings, creatures even they avoided. The drones paused, rotated, then, after a long moment, turned and flew away. When they were gone, the humans exhaled as one. Chloe looked at Lyra with something like awe. Maya pressed her hands together in a gesture of deep gratitude. Tasha simply nodded, but her eyes were bright. That night, as they shared a meal of roasted root tubers and dried lichen, Tasha pulled a small data chip from her boot. She pressed it into Lyra's palm. "If you ever need us," she said slowly, forming the words with care, "use this. Broadcast it. We will come." Lyra closed her fingers around the chip. It was warm from Tasha's skin. 2 days later, a human rescue ship appeared in the sky, a vessel named the Wayfarer's Hope. It descended on silent thrusters, landing gently in the basin below the spire. The humans packed what little they had. They hugged Lyra one by one. Maya placed a small, glowing seed in her hand, something from Earth, she said, that might grow even in broken soil. Then they boarded the ship and left. Lyra stood with Kale on the ridge, watching until the vessel became a speck, then vanished into the stars. She did not expect to see them again. She did not expect anything in return. She had only done what felt right. And in that moment, beneath the bleeding moons of a dead world, kindness had bloomed like a flower in ash. Months passed. Lyra and Kale drifted through the outer rim of the galaxy, moving from one broken world to another. They lived in the quiet places, abandoned mining stations, hollowed-out asteroids, the forgotten decks of derelict freighters. Lyra traded old star charts and Aelorian relics for food, fuel, and spare parts. Kale hunted small sky rats and kept watch while she slept. Life was hard, but it was steady. The seed Maya had given her stayed safe in a small locket around Lyra's neck. It had not sprouted, not yet. But Lyra carried it like a promise. The data chip Tasha had left behind sat in the bottom of her satchel, untouched. Lyra told herself she would never need it. She had survived this long on her own. She did not ask for help. She did not expect it. But the universe had other plans. One evening, as they sheltered inside the rusted hull of a cargo barge orbiting a dead moon, Kyle began to cough. At first it was just a soft rasp. Then it grew deeper, wetter. His scales lost their faint silver sheen and turned dull gray. He stopped eating. He slept more than usual, curled in the corner, his breathing shallow. Lyra tried everything she knew. She brewed teas from dried moss and moonroot. She sang the old healing harmonics, pressing her palms to his chest. She even used the last of her energy crystals to power a thermal blanket. Nothing worked. Fear settled in her bones. Dragons did not get sick like this, not unless something was very wrong. She remembered stories of the Blight, a sickness that had wiped out whole dragon clans during the early wars. If this was the same, Kale would not last more than a few days. She sat beside him through the night, stroking his head, whispering old lullabies. When dawn came, his eyes were glassy and his wings trembled when he tried to move. That was when she made her choice. With hands that shook, she pulled the data chip from her satchel. She connected it to the barge's old comms unit, a rusted box with flickering lights. She did not know if it still worked. She did not know if anyone would hear, but she broadcast the signal just once, a short pulse, coded and clean. Then she turned it off and waited. For 2 days, nothing happened. Kale grew weaker. Lyra barely slept. She talked to him, told him stories of their home, of the crystal forests and the singing towers. She promised him they would find a green world someday, where he could fly under real suns. On the third morning, as she boiled water for another useless remedy, a shadow passed over the barge. She rushed to the viewport. A ship hung in the void above them, sleek white with no weapons, no markings. Just a medical courier, its hull clean and bright against the black. Her heart pounded. She did not know whether to hope or hide. The ship sent a message on an open channel. No words, just a soft chime followed by a human symbol, a circle with a leaf inside, the sign for healing. Lyra opened the airlock. 2 figures in simple gray uniforms floated down on grav pads. They carried no weapons. One held a medical case. The other carried a crate. They did not speak Lyra's language, but they did not need to. They saw Kale. They saw Lyra's face. They understood. The medic knelt beside the dragon, scanning him with a small device. Then she nodded and opened her case. From it, she took a vial of glowing blue liquid and a thin injector. She looked at Lyra and pointed to Kale, then to the vial. Lyra nodded. The injection was quick. Within minutes, Kale's breathing eased. Color returned to his scales. He lifted his head and let out a soft, rumbling purr. The second human placed the crate on the floor and opened it. Inside were nutrient packs, water purifiers, a new thermal blanket, and a small star chart marked with safe zones, places where travelers could rest without fear. Then the medic handed Lyra a note. It was written in simple, clear script, for the one who shared her last drop. That was all. They did not ask for payment. They did not ask for her name. They simply bowed, returned to their ship, and left as quietly as they had come. Lyra stood in the airlock long after the ship vanished into the stars. Tears ran down her face, but she did not wipe them away. She had given so little, just water, just food, and yet they had crossed light years to save her friend. She looked down at Kyle, who was now sitting up, licking his paws like nothing had happened. He nudged her hand, his eyes bright again. From that day on, something changed in Lyra. She no longer saw kindness as weakness. She saw it as a thread, thin but strong, that connected all living things. And humans, she realized, did not just remember kindness. They carried it forward like a torch in the dark. Weeks later, they found Viridia. It was a world of green hills, wide rivers, and skies so blue they hurt to look at. No war had touched it. No machines had scarred its soil. It was quiet, peaceful, alive. Lyra landed her skiff in a meadow near a forest of tall, silver-barked trees. The air smelled of rain and blossoms. Birds sang in the branches. Kyle stretched his wings and took to the sky for the first time in months, circling high above, laughing in his own dragon way. Lyra planted Maya's seed by a clear stream. She watered it with clean rain and sang to it each night. To her surprise, it sprouted within days. Tiny leaves unfurled, glowing faintly in the dark. By the end of the month, it was a sapling, humming with a soft, steady light. She built a small home from fallen wood and river stones. She gathered fruit, fished in the stream, and watched the stars without fear. For the first time since Aloria fell, she felt safe. But peace, she knew, was never permanent. One evening, as she sat by the fire with Kale curled at her feet, a message came through her comms unit. It was a public broadcast repeated on every open channel. Her blood ran cold as she listened. The Vorthax Collective had attacked EOS 7. EOS 7 was a human colony, small, peaceful, known for its schools and gardens. It had no army, no defenses, just families, farmers, children. The broadcast showed images of burning fields, shattered homes, and fleeing ships. The Vorthax were not just invading. They were erasing. Lyra turned off the feed. Her hands were steady, but her heart was not. She thought of Chloe, Tasha, and Maya. Had they made it off Aloria safely? Were they on EOS 7? Were they in danger? She did not know, but she remembered their faces. Their kindness. The way they shared water when they had none. She looked at Kale. He met her gaze and stood up, his wings flaring slightly. He knew they would not stay hidden, not this time. At dawn, Lyra packed her satchel. She took her old harmonic resonator, a coil of plasma wire, and the last of her energy cells. She strapped a harness to Kale's back, not for riding but for carrying supplies. Then she powered up the skiff. As they lifted off, the glowing tree swayed in the wind, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. They flew toward the war. When they arrived at the edge of the EOS 7 system, they found chaos. Vorthax warships circled the planet like vultures. Human vessels, small, mismatched, outgunned, tried to hold them back. Explosions lit the void. Distress calls filled the comms. Lyra did not have a warship. She had a patched-up skiff and a dragon. But she had something else, knowledge. She remembered the Vorthax weakness. Their targeting systems relied on harmonic frequencies. If you disrupted those frequencies, their weapons went blind. She activated her resonator and began to sing. Not a lullaby, but a battle chant from Aloria's oldest wars. Kyle roared beside her, adding his voice to the sound. The combined frequency rippled through space, invisible but powerful. On the nearest Vorthax ship, targeting arrays flickered and failed. Missiles veered off course. For a few precious seconds, the human ships had a chance, and then something unexpected happened. More ships arrived, not military. Not from any fleet freighters, science vessels, passenger liners, even private yachts. Dozens of them, hundreds, they poured out of warp, forming a wall between the Vorthax and the planet. On one ship's hull, Lyra saw a familiar symbol, the leaf in a circle. On another, she saw Chloe's face on a comm screen, shouting orders to medics. Tasha stood on the bridge of a refitted cargo hauler, directing engineers to reinforce shields. Maya was on the ground, deploying strange pods that released clouds of biodampeners, shielding civilians from radiation and fire. They had come. Not because they were ordered to. Not for glory, but because someone once shared water in the dark. Lyra guided her skiff through the battle, weaving between explosions, her song growing stronger. Kale dove at Vorthax drones, his fire melting their sensors. Together, they became a storm of memory and mercy. And in that moment, Lyra understood the truth. Humans did not forget kindness. They multiplied it. They turned it into courage, into action, into a force that could stand against even the coldest machines. The battle was far from over. But for the first time, the Vorthax were not just fighting ships. They were fighting a debt. And humans always paid their debts, in ways that defied imagination. The battle for EOS 7 raged for 17 hours. Fire lit the sky. Metal screamed in the void. Ships broke apart like dry leaves in a storm. But through it all, Lyra and Kale held their ground. She sang her old war songs, twisting Alorian harmonics into weapons of disruption. Kale flew through smoke and shrapnel, his breath melting Vorthax sensors, his claws tearing through drone wings. They were small, but they were sharp, and they cut deep. From her skiff's cracked viewport, Lyra watched as human ships, freighters, school transports, even fishing boats formed a living shield around the planet. They had no armor, no heavy guns, but they had numbers, and they had will. Chloe's medical frigate darted between burning hulls, pulling survivors from escape pods. Tasha's engineering crew jury-rigged shield emitters from scrap, patching holes in allied ships with molten metal and hope. Maya's biodampeners bloomed across the surface of EO7 like silver flowers, protecting villages from radiation and firestorms. It was not a military victory. It was something older, something quieter. It was the sound of people choosing to stand together because someone once stood with them. Then, in the 13th hour, something changed. A Vorthax command vessel, the largest in the fleet, suddenly powered down its weapons. Its lights dimmed. It drifted silent in the middle of the battle. All comms channels crackled with confusion. Human ships held fire. Even Lyra paused her song. A single figure emerged from the vessel's airlock. Not a machine, not a drone. A person. He wore a tattered Vorthax uniform, but his face was human. Young, pale. His eyes were wide with fear and something else, relief. He broadcast on an open frequency, his voice shaking but clear. "I was once a prisoner on Vorthax Station 9, he said. I was broken, starving, left to die in a cell. But a human medic found me during a raid. She gave me water. She cleaned my wounds. She called me by name, not unit number. She said, 'You are still a person.'" He took a breath. Her name was Elena. She died 2 cycles later in the Kessel Belt, but I remembered her.
And I remembered what she showed me, that kindness is not weakness.
It is the strongest thing in the universe. He turned to face the Vorthax fleet. You call us inefficient, flawed, weak, but we remember. We carry each other. We repay every act of grace, and that is why you will never win. Then he did something no one expected. He triggered the command vessel's core purge, not to destroy, but to disable. The ship's systems went dark. Its weapons locked. Its drones froze in place. The entire Vorthax network in the system stuttered, confused, vulnerable. In that moment of silence, the human fleet surged forward, not with rage, not with hate, but with purpose. They boarded the disabled ships. They freed prisoners. They shut down war engines. They offered food and water to surrendered Vorthax pilots, many of whom were not machines at all, but brainwashed captives just like the young man who had spoken. The tide turned. By dawn of the 18th hour, the Vorthax fleet was in retreat, broken, scattered. Their command structure shattered not by firepower, but by memory. Lyra landed her skiff on the edge of a green field near EO7's capital city. Smoke still rose in the distance, but birds had begun to sing again. Kale curled beside her, exhausted but proud, his scales gleaming with soot and starlight. Chloe found her first. She ran across the field, her medkit bouncing at her side. She threw her arms around Lyra without a word. Then Tasha arrived, her face smudged with grease, her eyes bright with tears. Maya came last, holding a small sapling wrapped in cloth, a cutting from one of EO7's last surviving orchards. They sat together in the grass, watching the sunrise. No one spoke for a long time. There was too much to say, too much to feel. Finally, Chloe reached into her pocket and pulled out a small locket. It was made of polished steel, shaped like a leaf. Inside was a pinch of soil. "This is from Earth," she said softly. "Our first home. The one we all came from. We want you to have it." Lyra took the locket. It was warm, alive. "For when you plant your next tree," Maya added, handing her the sapling. Tasha placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "You gave us hope when we had none. Now it's our turn." Lyra looked at them, at these humans who had crossed stars for a debt they did not owe. She thought of the water she had shared on Aloria. Such a small thing. And yet it had grown into this, a fleet, a rebellion, a new kind of war. She did not say thank you. Words were too small. Instead, she opened her satchel and pulled out 3 small crystals, Alorian memory stones. She pressed one into each of their hands. "These hold songs," she said, "not just any songs. The songs of my people, of kindness, of courage, of remembering." They closed their fingers around the stones. The crystals glowed faintly, humming with ancient light. In the days that followed, peace returned to EOS 7, but not the old kind of peace. This was a new peace built on trust and shared scars. Refugees from a dozen worlds arrived, not as strangers but as neighbors. Former enemies worked side by side to rebuild. The young Vorthax defector, his name was Jaren, helped design new protocols to free others still trapped in the collective. Lyra stayed for a time. She helped plant the earth sapling in the center of the city square. She taught children how to listen to the wind for danger. She sang to the wounded at night, her voice weaving calm into their dreams. Kyle became a guardian of the fields, chasing off sky predators and napping in the sun. Children brought him fruit. Elders left offerings of polished stones at his feet. But Lyra knew she could not stay forever. There were other worlds, other debts, other seeds waiting to grow. Before she left, the humans gave her a gift, a new ship. Not a warship, not a freighter, a vessel built for travel, for healing, for connection. They called it the Wayfarer's Hope, rebuilt and refitted with human hands and Elorian harmonics. Its hull was white. Its engines were quiet. Its hold was filled with supplies, seeds, and memory stones from every world that had been saved. As she stood on the bridge for the first time, Lyra felt something she had not felt in years. Belonging. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a bridge. Kale settled into the co-pilot's nest, his wings folded neatly. He looked at her and rumbled softly. She smiled. They lifted off as the twin suns of EO7 rose behind them. Below, thousands of people watched them go, not with sadness, but with hope. Because they knew the truth now. Humans remember every act of kindness, and they repay it in ways that defy imagination. Not with gold. Not with power, but with presence. With courage. With love that crosses stars and heals broken worlds. And somewhere in the quiet between galaxies, the universe began to change. One small kindness at a time. Lyra and Kale flew for many weeks after leaving EO7. Their new ship, the Wayfarer's Hope, moved like a whisper through the stars. It carried no weapons, only tools. Seed vaults, medical kits, harmonic resonators, and crates of memory stones donated by grateful worlds. Lyra had become something new. Not a warrior, not a refugee, but a keeper of kindness. Wherever she went, she left behind not just aid, but stories. Stories of water shared in ruins. Of humans who crossed light years to heal a dragon. Of a war turned not by force, but by memory. Kale thrived. His wings healed fully and his scales shone brighter than ever. He often flew ahead of the ship, scouting for safe paths or playing in asteroid fields like a child in a meadow. At night he would curl around the ship's observation deck, his warmth seeping through the hull, a silent promise that no one aboard would ever be alone. They visited mining colonies where workers had not seen green in years. Lyra gave them earth seeds and taught them how to grow food in recycled air. They stopped at orphanages on war-torn moons where children had forgotten how to laugh. Kyle would let them ride on his back in the ship's cargo bay, his gentle rumbles calming their fears. In each place, Lyra left a memory stone, a small crystal that played a song of hope when touched, but peace, she knew, was fragile. One day, while charting a course near the Helios Drift, a distress signal broke through the comms. It was faint, broken by static, but clear enough to understand. A human research station, Orion Outpost, was under siege. Not by the Vorthax this time, but by raiders. Scavengers who preyed on the weak, stealing supplies, burning data cores, taking people as slaves. Lyra did not hesitate. She adjusted course. Kale growled low in his throat, his claws flexing. Orion Outpost was small, a ring of labs and living pods orbiting a dead comet. When they arrived, smoke curled from 3 of the modules. Raiders in patched armor were dragging crates onto a stolen freighter. Inside the station, lights flickered. Alarms wailed. Lyra did not attack. She broadcast a message on all local channels, a simple phrase spoken in calm tones. We bring no harm. Only help. The raiders froze. They expected fighters, not a white ship with no guns. Then one of them laughed. It's just one elf and her pet, he sneered over open comms. Take it. Strip it clean. But before they could move, something strange happened. From the dark side of the comet, another ship emerged. Then another. And another, freighters, scout vessels, even a retired hospital cruiser. All human. All flying the leaf and circle symbol. They had heard the distress call. And they had come. Not because Orion Outpost was rich. Not because it mattered to the galaxy. But because someone once helped them and now it was their turn. The raiders panicked. They tried to flee, but the human ships formed a net, gentle but firm. No shots were fired, no threats made. Just voices on comms offering food, fuel, and a path to surrender. One by one, the raiders laid down their weapons. Many were starving themselves, driven to crime by desperation. The humans did not punish them. They fed them. They listened. They offered work on rebuilding crews. Inside the station, Lyra found the survivors, scientists, engineers, a handful of children. Among them was a young botanist named Lena, her hands stained with soil, her eyes red from crying. She ran to Lyra and hugged her without knowing her name. "You came," she whispered. "You really came," Lyra held her tight. "We always come," she said. In the days that followed, the Wayfarer's Hope became a hub of healing. Chloe arrived with a medical team. Tasha brought engineers to repair the station's core. Maya helped replant the ruined hydroponic gardens. Even Jaren, the former Vorthax defector, came to help reprogram security drones to protect, not attack. Lyra watched them work together, humans, elves, former enemies, and felt something swell in her chest. This was not just aid. This was family. But the greatest surprise came at dusk on the third day. A small transport ship, older than most, drifted into orbit. Its hull was dented, its paint faded. But its signal was clear. It was from Eloria. Lyra's breath caught. She had not heard that signal in years. She met the pilot at the airlock. He was an elf, tall and weary, his robes patched but clean. His name was Elrin, one of the last temple keepers. He had survived the fall by hiding in the deep caves beneath the Starwell spire. He looked at Lyra, then at Kale, then at the bustling station full of humans helping elves and elves helping humans. "You did not just survive," he said, his voice thick. "You planted a new world." He handed her a small box. Inside was a single harmonic crystal, the last from the great library of Aloria. "The songs are not lost," he said. "They live in you now." Lyra wept. That night she stood on the station's outer platform, the stars stretching endlessly around her. Kale lay at her feet, his eyes half closed in contentment. Below, humans and elves shared a meal, laughing over stories of near misses and small miracles. She thought of the water she had given on a dead world. Such a small thing, and yet it had grown into this, a network of care that spanned the galaxy. She activated the harmonic crystal. A soft song rose into the void, ancient, gentle, full of memory. The humans stopped talking. They listened. Some closed their eyes, some held hands. In that moment, no one was alien. No one was other. They were all just people who had chosen kindness over fear, and that choice, Lyra realized, was the most powerful force in existence. Weeks later, as the Wayfarer's Hope prepared to leave again, Lena the botanist pressed a small pouch into Lyra's hand. "Seeds," she said, "from the first garden we rebuilt. They grow fast. They bloom even in poor soil." Lyra tucked them into her satchel, next to Maya's original seed and the soil from Earth. She did not know where she would go next, but she knew this. Wherever there was pain, there would be someone ready to help. And wherever there was kindness, it would be remembered. As the ship lifted off, the station's lights blinked in farewell, a pattern that spelled out in human and Alorian code. "Thank you." Kale stretched his wings and roared, not a sound of warning, but of joy, and Lyra smiled, knowing that the war was not over. But it was changing, because humans remember every act of kindness and they repay it in ways that defy imagination. The final call came not as a scream but as a whisper, a single pulse across the galactic net, sent from a place no one had heard from in years, the Vorthax core, the heart of the machine empire. The signal was not a plea for help. It was an invitation. Lyra stood on the bridge of the Wayfarer's Hope, the message glowing on the screen before her. Around her, the ship hummed with quiet energy. Kale lay coiled near the navigation console, his eyes open, alert. He had felt the shift in the air long before the signal arrived. The message was signed by Jaren and a group of former Vorthax pilots, scientists, and liberated minds. They had taken control of the core not through violence but through truth. They had shown the remaining drones and commanders what the collective had hidden, that organic life was not weak. It was resilient. It remembered. It repaid. Now they asked for one thing: witnesses, not soldiers, not conquerors, witnesses to the end of a war that had lasted too long. Lyra did not speak for a long time. She looked out at the stars, at the endless dark that had once felt like a tomb. Now it felt like a cradle. She turned to Kale. He stood, stretched his wings, and nudged her hand with his snout. His answer was clear. They would go. The journey to the core took 12 days. As they traveled, ships began to appear. First one, then 10, then hundreds. Human freighters. Aelorian skiffs. Mining rigs from the Helios belt. Medical vessels from EOS 7. Even a few former Vorthax drones, now painted with flowers and peace signs, drifted alongside like silent guardians. No one spoke of battle. No one armed their weapons. They came as they were. Farmers, teachers, healers, children. They came because they remembered water shared in the ruins, because they remembered a dragon healed by strangers, because they remembered that kindness, once given, never truly fades. When they reached the Vorthax core, the sight stole Lyra's breath. The great machine planet hung in space like a black pearl. But its surface was changing. Towers that once pulsed with cold blue light now bloomed with vines and moss. Drones moved not to destroy but to plant. In the central plaza, once a place of judgment, stood a single tree. Its leaves glowed with soft green light. At its base sat Jaren, surrounded by humans and freed minds sharing a meal. Lyra landed her ship gently on the outer ring. As she stepped onto the platform, a hush fell over the crowd. Thousands had gathered, not just from nearby worlds, but from across the galaxy. They parted as she walked, not out of fear, but respect. Chloe, Tasha, and Maya waited at the base of the tree. They wore no uniforms, only simple clothes. In their hands, they held seeds. "You came," Chloe said. "I always come," Lyra replied. Together, they walked to the center of the plaza. Jaren rose to meet them. His eyes were tired but peaceful. "The last command node is ready," he said. "We can shut it down, but we do not want to erase. We want to remember. Will you help us turn this place into something new?" Lyra nodded. For 3 days they worked. Humans taught former drones how to plant. Elves sang songs to awaken dormant soil. Children painted murals on cold metal walls. Kyle flew over the city, his fire not burning but warming the ground so seeds could take root. On the 4th day, they gathered again in the plaza. At its center stood a new structure, not a weapon, not a throne, but a garden. In it grew trees from Earth, saplings from EOS 7, moss from Aeloria, and flowers from 100 other worlds. Lyra stepped forward. In her hands, she held the last harmonic crystal from Aeloria, the soil from Earth, and the seeds from Lena. She placed them in the center of the garden. Then she began to sing. It was not a war song, not a healing chant. It was the oldest Aelorian melody, the song of remembering. A song that said, "I saw you. I helped you. You mattered." As her voice rose, others joined. Chloe hummed. Tasha tapped a rhythm on a metal plate. Maya whispered words in her native tongue. Jaren added a low drone, his voice rough but true. And Kyle roared, not in anger but in harmony. The sound spread through the core. Machines that had never known music shivered. Lights flickered, then changed from blue to gold. The great command node in the center of the planet powered down, not with a crash but with a sigh. Silence fell. Then, from deep within the planet, something new began to grow. A root. A shoot. A leaf. The Vorthax core was becoming alive. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy changed. The war was over. Not because one side won, but because both sides chose to become something else. Former enemies built schools together. Machines learned to garden. Humans and elves shared star charts not for conquest, but for travel. Lyra did not stay in one place. She and Kale continued their journey, but now they were not alone. The wayfarers' hope was joined by a fleet of peace vessels, each carrying seeds, songs, and stories. One evening, as they drifted near a quiet nebula, Maya sent a message. She had opened a new academy on EOS 7. Its name, the School of Remembered Kindness. Its first lesson, how to share your last drop of water. Lyra smiled. She opened her log and wrote a single line. Kindness is not small. It is the seed of everything. Years later, when travelers passed the old Vorthax core, they found not a machine world but a garden planet. Its skies were blue, its rivers ran clear, and in its center stood a great tree. its branches wide enough to shade 1,000 people. At its base, carved into living wood, were names: Chloe, Tasha, Maya, Jaren, Lyra, Kale, and thousands more. No one knew who carved them. But everyone knew why. Because humans remember every act of kindness, and they repay it in ways that defy imagination, not with fire, not with force, but with gardens, with songs, with open hands and open hearts. And in the quiet between stars, the universe finally learned to breathe.